Welcome back to the CUBE studio here at the New York Stock Exchange. This is Mixture of Experts, one of our NYSE Wired segments. And this week, we have been celebrating International Women's Day. Joining me now is a woman who's an absolute baller in her space, CEO of Brilliant Minds Unite, Dr. Jatali Bellanton. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure.
I'm going to call you Dr. J throughout this. Is that okay?
That's perfect.
That's how I know you. So, let's start. I know you have a fascinating career and a fascinating scope and breadth of what you do on a day-to-day basis. But maybe just to start, talk to me about what exactly is Brilliant Minds Unite.
So Brilliant Minds Unite grew from first being a financial literacy program to then being something where we're not just financially empowering youth and adults, but also angel investing. So it started to expand into 8 countries. Right now, we have a footprint in 8 countries where we're not just also giving financial empowerment, but we're investing in different sectors. We're also investing in real estate, gold mines, and everything has a philanthropic backing. Wow. So almost every company I have, we find a way to either put a dent in the world's problems or give back. And so it's been beautiful, or at least create some kind of sustainability for people who are coming through.
Wow, I think a lot of people talk about being mission-driven, but this is truly mission-driven. But your background is also quite unique, right? You've spent some time here on Wall Street.
Yes.
You have really been somebody who's always been advocating for the psychology of wealth and what that really means in terms of how it translates into decisions. Talk me through your journey.
So I started as a young one who had a mother figure who was horrible with money. And it made me go to my dad and be like, Daddy, teach me everything you know about money. And that journey started me with a development school for youth program called DSY, which then led me to my first ever paid internship at Credit Suisse First Boston, in which at one point I was kept on as a paid intern and grew my way into a permanent position.
Wow.
And so for many years I stayed in finance. And when I left Credit Suisse, at one point I did forensic accounting for a little bit. And then I became a mom. And I realized that no matter how much I love finance, it was so important for me to be a hands-on mom. And so having a toddler and being able to actually be the one to take care of him, teach him, and homeschool him, it made me shift my ambitions from being corporate to becoming an entrepreneur. And my first organization and company was Kids Who Bank. So Kids Who Bank was a youth financial literacy organization. And because I felt like all the adults around me knew about money and understood it, I was like, oh, okay, well, you know what? All adults know about money. But Kids Who Bank taught me that it wasn't just youth who needed that information. Their parents needed it. Their principals needed it. The teachers needed it. And it just grew. And before I knew it, not only were we making a certain amount of profits, but we also expanded to a point that we were able to now go into other markets in other countries. Because working in finance and working on Wall Street, one thing you learn about, rather it's in the UK markets, the Japanese markets, the American markets, is that diversification is key.
Wow. So what an interesting trajectory in terms of like forensic accounting, so many transferable skills there really into the world of wealth, right? But then also to kind of create that opportunity to connect communities and opportunity to and democratize to access is just so interesting. There's so much to unpack, but before we do, we met last week at an Elvest breakfast.
Correct.
Which was a very interesting event, like such a great room of women. I was so interested when you stood up and spoke about, you know, the ways in which your mother's decisions shaped you. You know, my parents are also terrible with money, and people talk right now about being bad with money, but like my parents didn't even have a bank account, right? Like that's how I grew up. So when people talk about generational wealth in the US, I'm from a whole other playing field. And I think it's really interesting in terms of how, you know, we really are defined and shaped by what we see, right? By the opportunity to get access, exposure, visibility. Talk to me a little bit about how you try and bridge that gap for people now who don't necessarily still have it at home.
So I think that's why it's so important to discuss financial empowerment, right? Sometimes we can understand what we're reading, but it's not truly comprehending it. And I think representation is one aspect of it. It's important to know that there are other people of color who are there, or women who are in the finance space who can break it down. And I do think that sometimes women, we have a different way of explaining finance that is almost a nurturing stance that actually seeps through a little bit different than the robotic zeros and one. And what's been my kind of secret weapon with teaching adults financial literacy or youth is that I come from an ABC aspect. I like to keep it as simple so that a youth and a baby could understand it. And I feel like if a toddler can understand it, then an adult should be able to understand it as well. And be making it second nature. So my biggest thing is making it second nature for everyone. I want people to, the same way we wake up and we think twice about, you know, certain things, or we just wake up and we brush our teeth. There's just certain things that you know you're supposed to do. I want everyone to be able to wake up and think budget, earn, save, invest. And that's the thing, the last one. Everyone talks about budget, earn, and save, but no one talks about invest. And I truly believe you need to invest your way to wealth. A quicker way to invest your way is to go into wealth is through investing. But when you see people who are talking about budget, earn, and save, a lot of people who are just saving, we now see a whole generation of baby boomers and other people who no longer have wealth managers, who might not have been given that by their companies. And now they're in a position where they're lost because inflation is letting them know they cannot afford the lifestyle that they thought they could have when they were first starting up in this game.
Wow. And do you think that there's a period or kind of a golden point by which young women or young men should begin to learn the fundamentals of investing? Like, I think a lot about girls who code and that whole strategy. I love that outlet, right? But should there be something similar in investing at schools? Like, what are your thoughts?
I think as soon as a child can speak and make requests, they should be learning. And the reason why I say that is because at 2.5 years old, my son used to tell me which apple juice he thought tasted good. And the one he liked was the most expensive one in the supermarket. So if you're going to start negotiating at 2.5, 3, say, I like that one, mommy, not that one, because he starts to recognize the box. And, you know, you see the designs. And sometimes I remember he went through the ad phase of seeing like a cute little design on the bottle of the juice. And he learned that, oh, that's the one that's a brand I like. And then he wouldn't want to taste anything else. And I used to be like, well, that one's $2, this one's $7. If you buy that one, you can't get the Hot Wheel car you want. But if you buy the $2 bottle, you get to get a Hot Wheel car that's $1. And he would be like, ooh. And so you start to just program a child's brain to mentally start thinking about the psychology of the wealth, right? Which is, you know, I can earn money towards my Hot Wheels or my whatever toys they like. If it's a girl and she wants all these Barbie dresses, my niece, oh my God, her Barbie doll's dresses alone was more than sometimes the cost of my clothing. And she would just be like 20 outfits for one Barbie. And I'm like, this is a fake toy. These people are making a lot of money. But then we made her earn and save towards what she would want. And I think that that is something that as adults or youth, we should all start changing the mind frame of what we think about when we come to spending, and having that conversation with our children as young as 3 years old, putting a star on your fridge and saying, this month we're working towards a new family car. And be like, well, mommy's not going to buy tacos this week. We're going to make tacos instead because it'll be cheaper to make the tacos. And we can put that extra money and budget towards buying the new family car. And so when you start to include your family, you don't have to tell them that, hey, we're financially struggling. Because as far as they're concerned, budgeting doesn't mean you're financially struggling. It just means you're budgeting. And we have to make these conversations second nature.
So when we think about women as investors, we know, at least anecdotally, in terms of what the research, the limited research that there is, let's be frank, has shown, is that women are more risk adverse.
They are.
There's a social conditioning that happens in, you know, the mind of a young woman that creates a level of inertia around certain financial systems and structures.
Correct.
And, you know, I sometimes think about this because I have some friends that are very successful, but still don't manage their own investments. Their husbands do this for them, or their partners, right? And they're so successful in their own field that it kind of baffles me somewhat. What are your thoughts on the real ways in which we can try and battle this out?
Well, I think one thing is normalizing the conversation around women also do manage the fund for some families. And it's a cultural difference. Because like in a lot of African cultures, there are women, depending what part of the world you come from, who the husbands give them the money and they manage the budget and they pay all the bills. And the man is the one who makes the money. But now in America especially, I'm seeing a shift where there are more women who are now the head of households. And there are more women who are retiring their husbands and telling their husbands to stay home and watch the baby. And the women are going into the world to make the money. But I think when we normalize those conversations, when they see people like yourself and myself talking about money, and when they start to realize how simple and easy it can be, right? It could be as simple as, let's start with buying one stock every week or every month. Let's start with, you know, hey, you're interested in a crypto, maybe dollar cost averaging. So it's like, okay, you might not be able to afford $10,000 for one crypto or $3,000 for one crypto, but maybe you can buy 500 every month until you get to that full 3,000 because you're able to buy sectional partial portions of this particular crypto or this stock. And so when we start talking about fractional investment, compound interest, and we start to normalize those conversations, and I see women like yourself and myself talking about it, it makes it easier. And I think meetings like Elvest, where we're in a room where other women who are investors are actually helping other women enter the room and just have the conversation and feel comfortable realizing that most of us who started have a story, right? Because if you think that this person's old, she's old, must have always known about finance, it makes it harder for you because you shut down. You're like, well, when am I going to start? But if you learn, hey, that person had a backstory too, and they had to learn. And sometimes some of my friends, they learn in their 40s and 50s. You know, I'm team 40s, and I'm happy to be part of that generation. But, I have friends who are in their 60s who are now learning about money. And I also have friends in their 20s who are like, oh my God, I'm so old and I don't know anything, and then they're overwhelmed. And I'm like, okay, this person's 62 and she just learned. So I think when we have those conversations, letting them know, you're not too young, you're not too old, just get started one step at a time. It goes so far.
And in terms of the usability of platforms like Elvest and others, do you think that those are game changers in terms of helping women get started? Like, are there any kind of key tips and tricks that you've learned or that you try and encourage others to be mindful of?
I mean, I will say that I hate to admit it, but ChatGPT has been a game changer, I think, for a lot of people learning finance. And the reason why I say that, the utilization of the AIs of the world and the Elvest and those platforms, there's just so much accessibility. And when you have programs like Investopedia, where I feel like they literally list almost everything there for you, the knowledge is literally at your grasp. When I was growing up, it was reading a Tony Robbins book and finding a mentor who already was in the stocks business and having them teach me. And then the flip to this now is almost anyone has access to these people because a lot of their prolific thoughts are online for you to find, or there's websites where you can literally just, okay, I want to know what compound interest is. I want to understand options trades, puts and calls. And so that might sound like Chinese right now, but now that I've said these words and I put them into your mind, you might go, well, what is an options play? What is a put? What is a call? And now you're going to go Google it. And someone like a ChatGPT can give you as much information. And you can say, program it to say, I want to understand on a fundamental 5-year-old level of understanding what is a put in options. And they're going to break it down for you in a way that even a child could understand it. And what is better than that right now?
For sure. And when we think about some of the more, I guess, fast, I don't want to call them accelerated investment structures or approaches, right? But things like, NFTs or crypto, and if you look at the profile of people who invested in those spaces early, who really made money, again, a lot of it is, a particular profile, right? It was a lot of young guys that really were very successful in that space. And sometimes I wonder about these private opportunities too for investment, which seem to be the kind of latest, huge opportunity. How those circles are formed, right? How those connections are made. And, there's definitely an element of understanding, how you break into those perhaps as a woman, or how difficult they are in terms of the, clique, I guess, that exists in those spaces overall. What has been your experience?
So one thing I've noticed in my personal experience is once I found one amazing opportunity and I was in that community, by my openness to go to events and meetings and brunches, I was able to meet other people. And I never looked at myself as a woman in a room full of men. I always looked at myself as an angel investor in a room full of other investors. So rather they were venture capitalists or other angel investors, the first thing is understanding the difference between the two worlds. Angel investors, we use our own money to invest, and venture capitalists use other people's money to pool together to invest. And once I understood that aspect of it, I would purposely go to conferences where I was around other angel investors, and by befriending them, going to lunch with them, asking them, what are you interested in right now? What are you about to invest in that you're the most excited about? And then doing my homework and my research. I think the biggest thing is DYOR. Do your own research. Rather it's a crypto investment or a company. One of my favorite investments 2.5, 3 years ago was Redemption Bank, right? I went to a conference. I spoke on a panel with one of the co-founders, and he said, hey, we're the first bank that is going to be owned by people of color, but we have a mixture of people on the cap table that are billionaires from around the blue blood American families. The list continues. Asian families, the list continues, and we're going to be the first one approved for in-house SBA. And I remember calling my friends at the SBA, one of my connections. I'm like, is this true? And they were like, well, yes, they were approved. How do you know about this? And I remember being like, that's something I want to invest in.
I love that.
And so sometimes just being in the room, going to the conferences, hearing what people are pitching when they're on these panels, and then going up to them and simply saying, are you still looking for investors? It can open a whole other door. And some of my favorite people right now that I invest alongside or I've made money with came from just opening my mouth at that one event and saying, are you guys still looking for investors, right? And making sure that you're investing within your comfort zone. So let's say you made $1 million, amazing. Now you might be an accredited investor, but at that same point, what budget are you comfortable spending? Are you an asset flow millionaire? Are you a cash flow millionaire? How much liquidity do you have? And making sure you're never overextending yourself.
I love it. I mean, I think you're so right. You know, it can be very intimidating from the outset, but the only way you're going to break through is by putting yourself in the rooms and being bold, right? Like, it's great advice.
Thank you.
So 2 things I want to close out on. Angel investing broadly. In my other reporting that I do in another space, I come across this challenge a lot when I talk to female entrepreneurs. The challenge of actually landing your first angel investment, right? That decision to leave your job, to make the, to be able to spend more time with your kids. Your very own story in some respects, right? It's getting that first opportunity. What's your advice to women? How can they meet angels like you?
So if they're looking to meet the investors versus actually investing in a project, the first thing I would say is make sure your numbers make sense. Because the biggest thing I've realized once I started to have the funding, I would see people who I wanted to invest with so badly. And I'm like, I love the base of the idea of your company. But when we invest, it's not just about the company itself. It's about do the numbers add up? Do they make sense? And the second thing is always going to be fast forward. How do we ensure that you as an angel investor, as a company I might invest in, are you passionate about this company? Do you know how to answer all the questions? Because I always say the companies that do the best is not just about the company, but it's also equally about the actual person leading the company. If you're going to be the face in the brand, are you like looking down at the floor and can't talk about the company? Are you so shy that you don't even know your known numbers? If I ask you like, okay, how much did you make last year? How much you think you're going to make this year? And you're like, I think we made, once I hear certain words, uncertain words, it's going to shut me down. It's going to make me not really too interested in your company. So if you're looking to meet angel investors and have them invest in your company, making sure you have a solid pitch within 60 seconds or less. I should know what your company is about, who you are, and I should either be like, wow, I want to learn more, and you should know your numbers. Because if you don't know your numbers, then or you're not confident, you're like, I think we're going to do good, I'm not too sure. If you start to talk uncertain, then I'm out most of the time, because I'm like, if you're not confident, do you want me to run with the ball? And I already have enough on my plate. So
it's so true.
I would definitely tell someone looking for funding, make sure you know your numbers and make sure you're confident about your company. And if you don't think you're going to be talking confidently about your company, then you need to hire a face of your company that will speak as if they are the big niche of the company.
No uncomfortable words. I mean, that is great advice in so many parts of life, including media. So I love that. And then lastly, we're sitting here on the floor, overlooking the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. British woman. Would you say British?
I say American and British.
American, British.
Yeah.
British accent, Irish accent. And I'm reminded that there's a whole world out there, right? Especially when it comes to opportunity, connection, community, and access. You have really, been a big flag bearer in terms of opening up the world and its connection points. Talk to me a little bit about how you think about that from the economics of it. It's probably in some respects easier to make money in markets like this. How do you stay true to the value?
So I like to say, when in the history of learning about money and wealth, I remember learning when the Great Depression happened that the British economy, when the British market was going down, then the American market went down. They both went down together, but then there were other markets that were doing well. And I remember talking to a lot of my mentors and clients who I managed their wealth at one point, and they would say, when this happened, we survived because we had money in Africa, we had money in Asia markets. And when I would hear that, I remember thinking, when I made a certain amount of money, that was what I was going to do, is diversify, not just by sectors, but what countries I invested in. So right now, I think the biggest thing I would say is, that is my biggest thing, is invest in multiple countries. If this market is doing bad, invest in another country that, if this one does bad, might be doing well because this one's doing bad. And if their market is doing bad, then at least America is a counter. And the simplest thing would be, I remember when we were investing in stocks and bonds and crypto and all these bits, there are certain companies in the stock market that are hedge stocks that, because the stock market is going down, if the Dow is not performing well, that they will actually do better. So there are companies that you could buy for $20, $30 per share that if the market crashes, they will go up to $100 per share, $200, $150 per share. The same when we saw 2008, the market crash, and we watched certain movies like The Big Short, what you're noticing in those movies is it's not just a movie, it's actual reality. There are certain companies that will profit and do well because the market is doing bad. Do you make sure that in your portfolio, you're investing in these companies that will actually do well because the market is crashing? And so my biggest tip and my biggest takeaway is, as I invest, besides investing in other countries, is investing in the markets that will do well and the companies that will do well because the market is doing bad. And that way you can balance out when the market is doing well, you're doing well no matter what. But even something like we mentioned, options puts. What is a put? A put is betting against a company. It's saying that right now, I think that, I won't say a company name, but let's say I think a certain particular company, let's say Shoe Rama, I don't know, is right now valued at $100 per share. I'm just making something up. And then in 6 months, I think because of the way the market is going, it's going to only be valued at $80 per share. If you vote and put an options play against that company, and you're right, in 6 months or even 3 months, that company goes down to $80 per share, you can make a big profit from that. So this is a whole other world in which betting against a company can actually make you money. So there's just so much ways to have fun in the stock market. I think that this is the best time to jump in, because when Macy's is on sale, we run to Macy's. We go, I got to go buy this dress, this shoes, because it's 30% off. But the market is 30%, it's 20%, it's 10% off. This is a perfect time, in my opinion, to start looking into investing and comfortably investing. If there's money that you spend on a meal, like a steak, that you're like, I spent $100 on this steak, would you take $100 and invest it in a company that might go up in value or make you profit?
I love it. Yeah. I just love it. I love your energy, of everything you do. Thank you so much for being here with us on theCUBE.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Gemma Allen, coming to you from the CUBE studio here at the New York Stock Exchange. This is Mixture of Experts with NYSE Wired. Thank you so much for watching.